On this week's episode of the Crushing Debt Podcast, Bouncing Back. So welcome back to the Crushing Debt Podcast. My name is Sean Yesner, owner and founder of Yesner Law, and I'm joined live in studio by your financial coach, George Cabello. How you doing, George?
I'm getting some deja vu, but yes, I'm doing well, my friend. How's it going? I got to say, it's a good time from a coaching standpoint, working with families. It's the summertime, so it's all about, vacations and how we're going to pay for it, and the guilt of going to Disney and then coming home and realizing, holy, we spent a lot of money going to Epcot. But it's good, man. Kids are good. I'm doing well. I don't like cutting grass, but I guess that's another issue. But we're doing good, brother. How you doing?
Nice, good. So when this episode comes out, we'll be one day away from the 4th of July. Do you have any 4th of July plans?
Probably eating and regretting it on Saturday, but that's okay.
Yeah. So no, we're doing good. You mentioned Disney. Probably a week or two after this episode comes out, we're taking our Disney vacation.
Nice.
So I was talking to somebody today, and I said, my mom has the Disney Vacation Club, so we get the free hotel. My mom wants to be grandma and spoil us by buying us tickets to Disney.
Good.
So I said, yeah, and I still have probably about 10 grand set aside for food.
And toys.
While I'm at Disney. So,
love it.
Yeah, but other than that, summer's in full-blown swing. But we have a guest on today's episode, and I want to kind of get to our guest because I'm really excited about this interview. So at 14, he suffered a traumatic, life-threatening snowboarding accident and was put in a coma. His parents were told he would never walk, talk, or eat on his own again. He did, and he set a personal goal of not walking, but running out of the hospital. He does a lot of speaking work to help those suffering from brain injuries. He was named top motivational speaker by Yahoo Finance in 2022. Today, he is a 7-figure business owner, Rhode Island-based real estate investor, speaker, and partner of Smart Real Estate Coach. Welcome our guest, Nick Prefontaine. Welcome, Nick.
So excited for this conversation, guys. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So, I think where I want to start, and I'm sure you've told this story a bazillion times, but for the listeners that haven't ever met you or heard you before, what happened? What do you remember about what happened with the accident?
Yeah. So it was a fateful day, I guess you could say, when I was in 8th grade with my friends, and it was always a really big deal when we got released a little bit early, and we always did when we were that age. It was always a big deal when we got released early. We got released early for a ski club, and you guys are down in Florida, so I don't know how much experience you guys have with ski club. So,
well, when you say ski club down here in Florida,
right, it's on the water
skiing.
Right, exactly.
All right. So ski club, and that was with snow, skiing and snowboarding. So we got released a little bit early. That was a big deal. And then my buddies and I had all brought our snowboard gear onto the bus to get ready, so we wouldn't miss a precious moment once we got to the mountain. And we got to the mountain, and the rest of the class migrated inside to get ready, but not us. We were ready to go. And we had a break for the chairlift. And on the chairlift ride up, we noticed that it was very icy because it had been raining earlier in the day. And that didn't slow us down at all, actually. And the chairlift went right over the terrain park where all of the jumps were. And I knew as soon as I saw it that I had to go off the biggest jump in the terrain park. There wasn't even a doubt in my mind. I wasn't even thinking, oh, maybe I should be careful. I mean, I was already thinking about what would you do after I landed that huge trick. So got to the top, buckled into my snowboard, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and confidently charged towards that jump with all my speed. And going up to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard, which threw me off balance. And that was the last thing that I remember.
Wow.
So I learned that I ended up going off that jump, and I landed on my head. I wasn't wearing a helmet. And they wanted to, because of the severity of my injuries, they wanted to bring a helicopter to the mountain to rush me to the hospital. They couldn't because it was too windy, so they had to send in an ambulance. And out of all the paramedics in the area, there was only one who could intubate on the spot, and I needed that to be able to breathe. Lucky for me, he was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day.
Right.
So there were several things that broke the right way that day, and really is what I credit to being here today. The first one was, yeah, the right paramedic showed up at the hospital. Something I learned after the fact. The second thing was, although I didn't have a helmet on, the pair of goggles that I was wearing were very thick. What you like wear over your eyes, and they had a lot of padding. So they told me, this is from like experts and doctors after the fact, that not only did they brace my impact initially, as I continued to roll down the mountain and continued to hit my head, my goggles moved mysteriously, or not. And I certainly believe everything happens for a reason. So they moved with each blow to cushion each blow between my head and the ice.
Wow.
The third thing, it's always easy for me to remember this because it's in three. So the third thing, once I got to the hospital, I was out. I was in a coma, unable to communicate with anyone in the ICU. And the only people that were allowed to see me at that time were my parents. So the doctors were just doing their job. They came into the room and wanted to share the news and the prognosis, and the not so good news, not so good news, not so good news. As I'm sure you guys know, that whenever you suffer a traumatic injury or an acute injury, the doctors can't really paint a rosy picture. So
Yeah.
they started to share that with my parents right in front of me because they figured, oh, he's in a coma, he can't hear us. So my mom stopped them when they started, and she said, no, not in front of him, because she understood that even though I was in a coma, I was still taking in information. So she made the doctors step outside the room, and once they were there, that's when they shared that I, even if I came out of the coma, probably wasn't going to be able to walk, talk, or eat on my own ever again. And I ended up being in the coma. It was a partially induced coma because they had to wait for the swelling to come down in my brain, because they were worried if I woke up and panicked, the swelling would increase and I would have died. So they had to put me into a coma. I ended up being in the coma for 3 weeks. I really don't remember a month because they were taking me off those medications and everything.
Yeah.
And it was right around that time that my journey kind of began. So my first memory is really a month of my life is gone. However, after a month, I was transported to a rehab hospital in Boston, and that's where my first memories started. So it was around this time that I started to unknowingly use a system to not only make a full recovery, but run out of the hospital. And that's the S.T.E.P system. So that's what I teach to this day in my keynotes, talks that I give, and with my one-on-one work with clients. I'll just what I can do is give you like a 10,000-foot view, and then
Yeah.
if anyone's interested at the end, I can let them know how they can download it for free. So S.T.E.P is an acronym. It stands for support. So make sure that you have the support of your family and friends right from the beginning. This is going to have you falling back on relationships that you built prior to your setback. And then T is trust. Trust that once you take your first step, your next step's always going to be available to you. And this also starts with trusting that voice that we all have inside of ourselves. So the way I can illustrate this is right around that time, a month after I was transported to the rehab hospital, look, I was still in I was still in pretty rough shape. I was in a wheelchair at the time. At best, I think my voice was a whisper, if not mouthing words. So I couldn't really communicate. My communication was like blinking and like nodding my head and that kind of thing. So I remember overhearing my parents talking with my team of doctors and therapists. And they were saying, okay, what do we need to do to make sure Nick makes a full recovery? I heard in the back of my head, you're going to run out of the hospital. So then I was able to communicate that to my parents and the rest of my team. And then running out of the hospital became our common goal. So E is energy. Maintaining your energy allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. Medication has the potential to get in the way of that. So
Okay.
I mean, obviously within reason here. That first night in the hospital cost, I think, $250,000. So
Wow.
if it wasn't for modern medicine, I wouldn't be here today.
Right.
However, there's a use, time, and place for everything. So a month after my accident, when I came out of the intensive care unit, was the time that we needed to allow the body to heal itself. And the way that I can illustrate this is, it was right around the time when I was still within a few weeks of being cleared to walk, like on my own. So I would have to, whenever I got up in the middle of the night at the rehab hospital to use the bathroom, I would have to get someone's attention, whether it was a nurse, or I would always have part of my support. I would always have my dad or an uncle or grandfather stay with me at night. So I'd have to get their attention. Well, my grandfather, Bob, I call him, and I still call him that. He was staying with me, and I woke up and I tried to get his attention. He couldn't hear me, so I figured, oh, okay, and I just hobbled to the bathroom. Nothing happened. I was able to make it back into bed safely. However, the hospital found out the next day, and they freaked out. They're like, oh, we can't have this, and we're going to give him all this medication before bed, and hopefully that should be able to calm him down so he's able to sleep through the night. And my mom heard this, and she's like, no, you're not. Just tell him not to do that. So they told me not to do that, and then nothing ever happened again. But if I didn't have that support with me at all times, that advocate, very likely they would have just gave me more medication to make their
Right.
jobs easier. P is persistence. So once you've taken your first step, keep getting up every day and taking your next step, no matter how small. And by continuing to move forward every day, you are building an unstoppable momentum. So if you fast forward less than 60 days later, I realized my goal of running out of the hospital. And it wasn't like my work was done. I had to continue to go to outpatient therapy for another 6 months, along with being tutored all summer long, 5 days a week, in order to continue on to high school with the rest of my classmates. And looking back on this, it's a little surreal that only 18 months later, after finishing my rehab from my snowboarding accident and being in a coma, I got my start in real estate. And
Oh, wow.
that was door knocking pre-foreclosure doors, or homeowners that have received a notice of default letter from the bank, meaning they missed several payments, and the bank still hadn't foreclosed on the house. So
Right.
I would get a list of these, and I would go to these doors, these cities where they were like closest together, so I could do the most amount that I could. And I did that throughout the rest of high school. And then after high school, I got my real estate license, started helping buyers and sellers, and then actually, I think right there is a good time for me to take a breath. If you guys have any questions.
Yeah. No, it's a good
Yeah,
story.
no.
It's amazing.
And I have a bunch of questions. So
Yep.
based on the timeline, if you had your accident at 14 and then you said about 18 months later, is when you started your real estate career. So you were what, 15, 16 when you started door knocking and working with foreclosures and that kind of stuff?
So I was, my dad was, he had a real estate investment company at the time, and I picked up one of the books I picked up off his library shelf was Cash Flow Quadrant. And this wasn't right after my accident that first summer, but it was the next summer. So then the following summer after my accident, I was 15 and I started to get interested, and I was like, all right, how can I how can I help out? How can I, like, what can I do? And right around that time, they were playing with the idea of having a bird dog, if you will, go and knock on these doors. So I was like, oh, it's perfect. So no, I couldn't drive with anyone legally. I couldn't drive with anyone in the car. However, I could do like 50, up to 50 and 70 doors in a day. I couldn't ride with anyone though.
Right. Well, and so the other thing, are there any lingering effects? I mean, they said you wouldn't walk, you wouldn't talk, you wouldn't eat. Obviously, you're talking. I'm not necessarily going to ask you to eat during the interview. I assume you can do that. You also said you were getting up and walking around, but are there any other lingering effects from the accident?
So that's a great question. When I got in my accident, there was the entire left side of my body was paralyzed. So every time I would reach for something with my right hand, I'm naturally righty. So anytime I would reach for something with my right hand, they would almost like knock it down and make me do it with my left. So obviously I have full use of my left side of my body, left hand, right hand, everything. And yeah, I think when I was still in the hospital and I had a tutor come in there to kind of work with me, I was writing with my right hand, and I have still to this day, I have minor tremors in my right hand. So it took until that summer after my accident when I was working with my tutor, and it was like challenging. I could do it, but it was challenging to write with my right hand. So I said, well, why can't I don't have any tremors in my left hand. Why can't I teach myself how to write my left hand? So I did that. I've now been writing my left hand longer. It's way better than my writing ever was with my right hand. And a little bit later, I'll tell you how that connects. It comes back up. But for the purposes of moving the story forward, I would say no. I'm good.
There you go. That's great to hear. Let me ask this. So Nick, what kind of traumas do you see often in your clients? Again, you've obviously have an amazing story that you apply, and you have the step system that you help out others with. But what's a common trauma that you encounter with your clients, which it's physical, emotional, financial? But what are some of the more common things that you're seeing with your clients today?
So, good question. By sharing my story and like doing what I'm doing today and joining you guys, I don't want to it's a pretty dramatic story. But by sharing that, I don't want to diminish anyone's trauma.
Right.
um, which is important to mention. So the types of people that we've worked with are like health challenges, like navigating diagnosis with doctors and experts and everything, and not to hang on their every word because they're only giving you the worst case scenario. Another type of person is like someone that's had an illness in the family or a death in the family, and helping them kind of adjust to life after that, and then be able to thrive and like move into their limitless potential after that, because a lot of people will hold on to that um, the negative feelings and everything associated with that. Most recently, I would say there was someone that I was working with. She was dealing with um, oddly enough, she was having tremors in her hand, and it was caused from I believe it was kidney or liver medication that she'd been taking for like 10 years. And all the doctors, she had tons of doctors tell her that they didn't know what to do, and they couldn't really give her a clear path. So I helped her get everyone on the same page and kind of demand that all right, well, I just don't want to do this anymore because it's causing so many negative effects in my body.
Right.
And I remember working with her that I kind of kept her focused on what the next step was, because she said I like helped her put things in perspective. And this was only over like less than a week. And after a few days, she had all of her specialists and doctors meet. And I remember getting that phone call from her. She called me after to tell me how it went. And I answered. I said, hello. She said, I won. I started laughing. I said, what do you mean? She said they agreed to start weaning me off the medication, what they didn't want to before. And we're going to start to look for natural alternatives. So that really means the world to me. I mean, doing this and also taking stages and everything is spreading my message, but that work kind of means the world to me when I'm able to help someone like that.
Yeah. There were a few things that drew me to you as a guest for the show. The first thing we don't really need to talk about too much, although we can, is that my late wife suffered from seizures. She was epileptic, and so I have firsthand knowledge and experience in dealing with somebody with brain injuries, seizure disorders, those kinds of things. And she actually turned that into helping people with brain injuries and brain disabilities to get jobs. She was an occupational therapist for the state of Florida when I met her. So she used her epilepsy to really help people with brain injuries and brain disabilities and issues like that. So that was one thing that drew me to you. The other thing was just the story of overcoming, because we talked about it. This is a show about eliminating debt. And so what is somebody who suffered an accident and had to recover from that accident? Well, it's probably not the best analogy, but I know that a lot of people suffering from debt, or a lot of people in a lot of debt, kind of get into that place mentally where they don't know how they're gonna dig themselves out of it. And then kind of layered on top of that, you mentioned it briefly, we talked about it prior to recording the show, you had some fairly significant hospital bills, you had some fairly significant debt from the accident, whether it was you or whether it was your parents. I that part, since you were a minor, but I was wondering maybe if you could talk a little bit about your experience with some of the medical debt that you had and some of the other debt and budget issues that came out of your scenario. And then just generally, somebody who's sitting back listening to the show saying, I don't even know where to begin to get myself out of this mountain of debt. What do how can we help those people?
Right.
So this is going to be you're going to wonder what the heck I'm doing with this answer, but trust me, I'll get there. Just bear with me.
Okay.
So, when I was at the time, my parents had health insurance, luckily, and to cover that first night in the hospital, like I said, it was $250,000. They
Wow.
covered it. They covered it, no problem, like no questions asked. So, um, I've stuck with that company for health insurance. I'm 36 years old. So my accident was when I was 14 years old. I've stuck with that company because it's more of like a loyalty thing. Like, to me, like, they were with me. They covered my everything to do with my accident. So I've stuck with that company until recently, a couple years ago, when the company name-wise sold and it got transferred to another company. So I was like, well, it doesn't make sense for me to stay with this anymore. So I looked at more affordable options. So um, that's that's why really I think insurance is so, even though it's everyone complains about it, having to pay insurance, it's so important to have the right kind of insurance. Um, Now the second part to your question. So after, like I said, this is the part where I want you to stick with me. So after after I got out of high school, I got my real estate license, started helping buyers and sellers sales with real estate. And then I kind of, at the end of 2014, my dad, who was buying homes creatively, non-conventionally, this is different. He had just started it within the past year back then. So 13, 12, 13, that time frame. So he was buying homes creatively, non-conventional, without using any of his personal credit or like signing personally or any money. Buying homes. So like, I'll give you a few examples. Buy if it's one of them is a like a lease purchase or a rent to own. He will
Yeah,
buy
yeah.
Right.
basically a delayed cash sale. Wouldn't close on the home. However, then another one would be he would actually close on the home subject to someone's existing debt. And the third was if they didn't have any debt, he would close on the home and then structure principal only payments to the seller. However, he was buying them, he always needed to sell them on a rent to own. So there's only 20% of the market who's able to walk into a bank and get a loan today. So we go after the other 80% of the market. Not to say they're all good. However, there's a large percentage in there, whether self-employed business owners, they make great incomes, they have money for the down payment, they just can't walk into a bank and get a loan. So at the end of 2014, my dad approached me and he said, I'm getting all these properties. Like I think at the time he had 10 or 15 properties. He said, I need help with getting them on the market. So I started helping him, not listing them as a realtor, but I started helping him doing that and putting them on the rent to own market. Then that turned into, oh shoot, I need someone. I'd rather not hire someone. I need someone to handle all the buyer inquiries that are coming in. So then I started doing that. Over the course of 13 or 14 months, my income totally shifted where it didn't make sense for me to keep my real estate license. So I let it go and joined him full time January of 2016. And ever since 2016, we've been holding events once or twice a year where I've always been able to tell my story from stage. And we have associates that we work with all over the country to do real estate deals like we've done in our family business over the years. So ever since I got out of high school, I've always had this voice in the back of my head that's always been saying, "Yeah, great, that's great, Nick. But what you really need to be doing is telling your story from stage and helping trauma survivors to get through their challenge and then thrive with the rest of their lives." So that voice has always been there. However, because we've been holding events once or twice a year since 2016, I've always been able to tell my story from stage. So I thought,
Right.
okay, yeah, I'm scratching that itch. I'm listening to it. Well, not really. I mean, a little bit, yes. So that voice died down. And then in 2019, I shared my story at one of our events. And I think at that point, I had, that was probably the longest that I had ever done it. It was maybe 15 or 20 minutes. And I thought like that was a big deal to me. So there was a woman that approached me after, and she said, "I'm not trying to steal you from your dad and your family real estate company, your business. However, if you're ever looking to fine tune your message and bring it to another level so that you're able to have maximum reach and impact and help the most amount of people, I can introduce you to a few coaches and mentors that have helped me along the way.
Sure.
Well, I wasn't ready yet, because I was actually going through, and this answers your earlier question. I was going through a voice challenge that I had developed in 2012. So the way that I kind of learned about the voice through this whole thing, and like I developed a voice challenge in 2012 from screaming my scripts. I caused damage to my voice. The way I learned about it was, whenever you go to talk, your vocal folds come together. So they come together and then they relax. Um, and because of my situation, because I had like the minor tremors in the right side of my body, um, they would come together when I was screaming my scripts. And then when they were supposed to relax, one of them got stuck. So I had to, in August of 2013, I started seeing a voice specialist in Boston, getting Botox injections in my vocal folds, along with their higher level speech pathologist.
Right.
So over the course of, it took 7 or 8 years of me getting these Botox treatments to really, obviously I don't have an issue with my voice anymore. I'm able to be here today and talk with you guys. So over the course of, it took 7 or 8 years to get that out of my system. And when this woman approached me after hearing me in September of 2019, my voice was still kind of strained. That's
Mm.
kind of what it sounded like. So
Right.
I wasn't ready for, like, to take that next step to call her and say, all right, what should I do? But I always hung on to her card. And then in May of 2021, I promise I'll get there, guys. In May of 2021, I finally reached out to her and I said, okay, I'm ready. So she said, just because that voice kept getting louder and louder in the back of my head.
Sure.
So she said, she introduced me to one of her mentors, which became my mentor, Trisha Brooke. And since that initial call with Trisha in May of 2021, there has been no voice in the back of my head. So what that's evidence to me of is that I'm doing exactly what I was put on this earth to do. So
Sure.
I shared my goals with Trisha and what I was looking to do. And I said, do you think that's possible? She said, absolutely. I said, all right, great. What should I do? She said, the speaker salon. And that's $25,000. That's, you commute to New York City for 6 weeks in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to be on stage at the Triad Theater with up to 10 or 15 other speakers. And then on the final week, and you get to work on a 10 to 15-minute talk in those first 5 weeks. And then on the final week, you perform it for event planners, TEDx organizers, like people who book TEDx speakers, podcast hosts, like other people that are looking for speakers. So I said yes. Like I said, that was 25,000. And then halfway through that, she approached me. She pitched the idea of what it would look like to work with her one-on-one. She said she specializes in working with speakers to help them build out their speaker platform. She said that's 75,000. I said,
That's cheap.
I don't have that. I don't have that hiding under my mattress. But give me a week and I'll figure it out. So I went and applied for financing. I got approved. And 6 days later, I wired her the money. And the reason I talk about that, because that was a loan. That was debt. It wasn't just I could forget about that.
Mm-hmm.
I had to make monthly payments on that. It was a 5-year loan. I had to make monthly payments on that for 3 years. And then after 3 years, I paid it off. So that was at the end of last year. In November of last year, I paid it off. And I think that's the core piece I wanted to get to, because that's so important. Since I paid that off, there is just so much freedom. And I just, yeah, I don't know. I'm very happy about that I'm able to do that. But my work with Trisha now, like I said, prior to her, I was only talking maybe 15 or 20 minutes. Now I give 50 and 60-minute plus keynotes to brain injury associations all over the country and also other organizations that support individuals that are going through trauma. If you would have told me in like 2018 or 2019 that this is what I would be doing, I would have told you you'd be nuts. However, it's all about just taking that next step in front of you. And I'm so happy that I did.
Right.
Yeah. So the website that I have for you, it's neat. I'm sorry, nickprefontaine.com, right?
Yep.
That's the
NickPrefontaine.com.
best way for people to get a hold of you.
Yeah, so what we went over is like just a 10,000-foot view of the STEP system. But if you go to nickprefontaine.com/step, you can download the entire STEP system for free today and learn all about support, trust, energy, and persistence.
Nice.
Nice. Cool.
One thing that I would ask then too, Nick, I mean, obviously amazing story, so much to really for the listeners to think about. But if there was one thing, like one mindset shift that you could recommend people today, you know, like listening to this show itself, that they can practice today to start healing or moving forward, what's the one thing that, you know, if you say, like, if you start this today, it's at least your first step in healing and moving forward? Like what's that one thing that could get people started? No pressure, of course, but you know.
So this is gonna be yeah, this is gonna be a little bit of a deep answer. So I think we all we like intuitively we all know what we should be doing.
Right.
Whether it's like some action towards what we know we should be doing, some baby step.
Mhm.
However, there's so many of us that are paralyzed with fear and overwhelm that we just don't know. We don't know what to do because of, oh, we got this and this and this, and we think like 10 years in the future. That's not the way. Even when I was in the hospital, like when I was in the hospital or going through the voice issue, if I would have thought in 2012 that you be dealing with this for 8 years until it comes out, until you like work it out of your system, it would have been completely overwhelming. So I think you just have to deal with what's in front of you. Just like we all have that voice in the back of our head, we all intuitively know what we should do. Take a baby step towards it. Um, because once you take that baby step towards your ideal, towards where your ideal goal, your ideal outcome, your next step will reveal itself.
Nice.
Yeah, it's that old adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
That's
There
it.
you go.
Yeah. Well, cool. I really do appreciate you being on the show, Nick. Is there anything else you wanted to mention? Anything we didn't ask you?
Yeah. So I mean, I mentioned it's just a part of who I am. The real estate aspect of my story. So if anyone, we glossed over it. It was only 30 seconds or whatever. However, if that rang true with anyone, you can check out our website. That's smartrealestatecoach.com/mastersclass. And that's going to teach you all about how we buy and sell on terms, is what we like to call it, without using any of our credit or money. So if anyone's interested, they can go check that out.
Yeah, we do. So the podcast itself is about eliminating debt. However, in my practice here in Florida, not only do I, help people with debt, help people with bankruptcy issues, do that kind of stuff, but I also help real estate investors as well. So I have the other half of the practice is all real estate investing. So all the things you mentioned, the landlord tenant aspects of it, the the seller finance aspects of it, the subject to transactions, distressed properties, foreclosure properties, all of that stuff. You and I could probably sit down and do another couple hours just on those techniques. But, you know, I think the thing that I take away from it the most is just take that next, literally and figuratively, just take that next step.
Right.
Just take the next step that's in front of you.
Well, yeah, well said. And I would say, if there's one last thing, if there's anyone that's out there that, like I said, it can be very easy nowadays to get overwhelmed with all the information out there, and just like, especially right after you suffer a life challenge or a setback, it can be overwhelming to think, oh, I got to do all this stuff to get back to where I was. Don't do that. Just deal with what's in front of you. Like when I was in the hospital, I didn't. I mean, this is kind of being facetious, but did I think every day and get up and say, okay, what letter am I working on today? No, that's crazy. I dealt every day with what was in front of me. That's all you can do. Do the best you can with what's in front of you, and your life and situation is going to change as long as you keep getting up every day and doing that.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I really appreciate you being a guest, and I really appreciate the message. I do want to tell everybody real quick. I want to thank our friend, our sponsor, Sam Cohen. He's with Attorneys First Insurance. If you're an attorney or a title company, you want malpractice coverage, contact Sam at attorneysfirst.com. That's also his website. This interview is audio, but if you want to see some of the behind the scenes, some of the video, that's at the patreon.com/crushing-debt website. So you can go there, you can support us, you can support the show. I would definitely encourage everyone to check out the two websites that Nick mentioned, the Prefontaine.com /step, and I'll put that in the notes. And then his other one as well, the smartrealestatecoach.com. I'll put both of those websites in the notes. So other than that, thank you, Nick. I really do appreciate you being a guest on this week's show.
Oh, you're welcome. This has been fun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I guess I will say that, you know, Nick is definitely somebody that wants you to have more money at the end of the month rather than month at the end of the money. And we will talk to you in next week's episode.